I hope you're as enthusiastic as that after the talk. So we'll see. Well, let me start out. I'm going to talk about AI, some of the things AI can do, some of the hype that's associated with AI, and some of the mathematics behind AI. There's actually mathematics behind AI and the capability of what AI can do and can't do. We know that we're all blessed with AI, and you know, everybody talks about AI, but nobody ever really defines it. Anybody want to take a stab at defining AI? I think it's anything that is gee whiz that is done with a computer. That's my definition of AI. And so we see up here all of these different things, and we're kind of numbed by familiarity, aren't we, with these things? But this is how AI has impacted our lives. From Amazon to Spotify, we've used Lyft here to get around, so you can see that AI has indeed impacted our lives. We also have a lot of really landmark applications coming out with the Asimov. We have 20 years ago Kasparov being beat by Deep Blue in chess. He was a world champion, and that was a big deal for AI. We also have IBM Watson here beating these people in Jeopardy. And that was a big deal too. My goodness, AI can win at Jeopardy. And then the most recent one, this has been kind of a goal of AI for years, is to develop a self-trained artificial intelligence that could actually win at the most complicated common board game, which is Go. And that did incredible things. So yeah, AI is really doing some interesting things. We're motivated by AI, by all of the science fiction we write. We hear a lot of AI, and sometimes there's a blur between what actually happens in the media and what happens in real life and the capability of real life, and sometimes this is confused by both practitioners, and I want to address that, and we'll address that in a little bit. First, I'm going to talk about the Frankenstein complex. Why does AI scare so many people? And one of the things has been identified by psychologists as the Frankenstein complex. And we have Bill Gates that's worried about AI. He says, I don't understand why some people are not concerned about artificial intelligence. Stephen Hawking says the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. That's kind of spooky, right? Let's hope that doesn't happen. And then we have Elon Musk with artificial intelligence. We are summoned by the demon. George Gilder, one of the founders of Discovery Institute, in an interview said something wonderful. He says, Elon Musk is a great entrepreneur, but he's kind of a retarded forecaster. So indeed, this is what we see here, and we'll address some of this pretty soon. What is the Frankenstein complex? It's a term coined by the sci-fi writer Isaac Asimov a number of years ago, describing the fear that people would have concerning machines. Mechanical men, if you will. And there's something kind of weird. We're afraid of Frankenstein. He's kind of a spooky looking dude. But do you ever notice the guy walks really slow? And if you actually ran, you could get away from him. And I bet you Mike Tyson could take him out with a single punch. But nevertheless, we have this innate scared viewpoint of Frankenstein and what he is. And then there's the uncanny valley hypothesis, which parallels this. The uncanny valley, by the way, is denoted by a dip in a regression curve. So don't try to make anything deep out of it. No pun. But it's the uncanny valley. But here's the thing. When we're born, pre-wired into our brain is this capability of looking at things and seeing faces, so babies can understand and see their mothers very well. So we have this incredible ability to look at all of the different things in AI, or all of the things in our environment and see faces. Here's examples. Okay, do you see them? This is because we're pre-wired. And you know, they're kind of funny here, but they can also be spooky, can't they? You can have this demon-sucking, this spoon-sucking demon here, you know, which is kind of spooky. And on the right, take a look on the right. This is something out of Stephen King novel, right up here, right? Yeah, up on the right-hand side. So you can see that there is this Frankenstein complex, this uncanny valley hypothesis thing, which is staring us in the face, which is really kind of spooky. So that's the reason sometimes we kind of have a fear of AI. And the practitioners and the people who sell AI take advantage of this, as we'll see in a minute. That's the reason when I look at this, you get kind of the willies, right? You know, it's kind of human, but it isn't human. This is the Frankenstein complex, the uncanny valley hypothesis. But here's what's interesting. The AI in this robot has nothing to do with its container. The container is put around as seductive optics to sucking you into thinking, yeah, this is something human which is happening, where actually the machine of AI really has nothing to do, very little to do with the container in this case, right? And so it's actually placed down there to seduce people into thinking that things are happening which are greater than they actually are. There's a lot of hype associated with AI. Let's go through some of this that we see in the news. Neuroscientists translate brainwaves into recognizable speech. Yeah, we'll go over that. It turns out you got to cut a flap out of your brain and put neurotransmitters on your brain. They don't tell you that in the article, though. End of life as we know it. Well, that's a cheery little thought, right? Protecting humanity in the face of artificial intelligence, like it is going to be a danger to us, that there's a presupposition that there's going to be a change of it. And you can see how we can prepare for the catastrophically dangerous AI and why we can't wait. This happens. We see these sort of headlines all over the place in artificial intelligence as we hit the hype curve. Now, why all of this junk AI news? Well, number one, it's a fake news clickbait. If you can find a seductive headline that seduces you into clicking on it, you see advertisements, and people, the web hosters get paid for that advertisement, so they can use this. Another one is untutored journalists. These are people that don't understand AI and haven't the wildest idea, and they begin to go explore AI and actually interview people in AI, and they put their own untutored comments in their results. Research promotion. Professors like me spend a lot of their time generating grant money. And how do you generate grant money? You set up your own website, you call yourself my case, the Robert Marks Lab or something like that, and you begin to go solicit money from the National Science Foundation, from the National Institutes of Health, from DARPA, the DOD, and other places. And this promotion works on these funding agencies. And of course, there's always the conspiracy nuts. How do they do it? One is seductive semantics. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You hear words thrown around like artificial intelligence without them being defined. You hear the word consciousness being thrown around without it being defined. Same thing with self-aware. And so you'll see this seductive semantics, which actually brings you into this idea that this AI is doing something that it actually isn't doing. There's also the seductive optics, which we talked about, the container that contains the AI being put up in a human form, so you get this really strange, wonderful feeling. And another thing that happens a lot is hidden details. Many of these reports don't go into the details of what goes on. Here's an example. No more secrets. New mind-reading machine can translate your thoughts and display them as text instantly. Notice all capitals, instantly. Okay, I read this and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And so I went to the actual paper. This was out of a peer-reviewed published paper. And I read it. And you know what they had to do? They went to a center where there are epileptics, people being treated for epilepsy. And these people were being treated by brain surgery. They all had flaps of their skulls cut out. And so in order to read the mind, they actually had to cut out a flap in the skull, place a grid of electrodes on the patient, and that's how they got the signals to train the neural network. Another thing they didn't tell you is that if they trained a neural network on me, and then they trained a neural network on you of a sequence of about a dozen curves, guess what? Your neural network doesn't work for me, and mine won't work for you. It's an individual one. So again, hyperbole and exaggeration. Here's another one which really made it. Facebook shuts down chatbots that created the secret language. Had anybody heard about this or read about it in the news? Okay, that gave you chills, right? Well, here's what the developer said. Analyzing the reward function and changing the parameters of an experiment is not the same as unplugging or shutting down AI. If that were the case, every AI researcher has been shutting down AI every time they kill a job on a machine. Their machine wasn't working well. Their machine wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. So they shut down, and this journalist, untutored in what was going on, said that they created a new language, and it made it all over the place as hyperbole. So we see a lot of this, and the question is, of course, is should we be concerned? And I love this quote by, okay, who can pronounce the name? Okay, thank you. And I know he's a big name, but I've just read his name, never pronounced it. He said, by far the greatest danger of artificial intelligence is that people conclude too early that they understand it. So one of the things that we need to do, and that I'm going to do here with very little mathematics, I've removed the mathematics because I usually have it in my talk, but it made people doze off. This is after lunch, and you're having the carbs kick in, and we don't want you to get sleepy. What's that?
I'm sad. I like that.
Do you?
Some of us like that.
Oh, well, I tell you what, send me email. I will send you math that'll explode your eyes.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Here's a list of what I propose. AI will never write better and better AI programs. There's this idea of the singularity that AI is going to write better programs. And that program is going to write a better program, and that program is going to write a better program, and that program is going to write a better program, and pretty soon we'll have a duplication of human intelligence. That is not going to happen. In no place has one computer program generated another computer program which is more intelligent than the original program. And we'll substantiate that in the talk. AI will never be conscious. First of all, you have to define what consciousness is. And that's a very difficult thing. I do know that AI, the primary work in writing better programs, use genetic or evolutionary programs to attempt to write better programs. And that, I know, has been basically abandoned. I have a colleague at Yampolsky, okay, that actually wrote a very nice article on this, and indeed agrees that so far. So the AI sketch, yeah, we'll talk about that afterwards, and I'll be able to make an intelligent comment on it. Also, I maintain that AI will never understand or be creative. Notice that I'm using words that I need to define here, right? I need to identify what I mean by understand. I need to identify what I mean by creativity. And we'll do that, because before you hear any talk about these things, you have to define your terms before you do things, before you talk about them. Maybe, though, AI might simulate common sense. We still have a problem with Winograd schemas. Winograd schemas are sentences which are easily decodified by human beings. There was, how many have watched Fred Flintstone? Okay. there were one episode, Fred got his fingers glued in a bowling ball. And he says, Barney, go get a hammer. I can't get him out. And so Barney got a big hammer, and he says, okay, Barney, when I nod my head, hit it.
Oh, no.
So the question is, how would a computer decode that? Without the context of what was happening, how would they take that vague pronoun it and associate it with those? One which is brought up in Gary Smith's book, The AI Delusion, is the following sentence: I can't cut down this tree with this axe because it is too small. I can't cut down this tree with this axe because it is too small. The axe is too small. That's the only thing that makes sense. Now, computers will have a difficult time making common sense. I think we have somebody here who works for the Paul Allen Center. Paul Allen actually gave his billions of dollars, lots of money, to this center to give computers common sense. And the Winograd schema is still something which is difficult. They actually have annual contests, and according to Gary Smith, in the last one, the best that people could do on Winograd schema, the two types that I told you, when I nod my head, hit it, and this axe is too small to cut down that tree, the axe tree example, the best they've done is a little bit above 50%, which is just a little bit above chance. So we still have challenges with interpretation of these. Will that ever be done? Maybe. I'd like to see it done, and I'd like to see the technique for doing that. We have to put the buts in here. People say that AI is dangerous. It is. AI, especially complex AI, will have consequences and unexpected consequences, unexpected contingencies. You've heard about the self-driving car where the plastic bag flew across the front and the car didn't know what to do, right? That was an unexpected contingency. Now, what happened was that they went back and they looked at that problem and they did some recoding and the problem was solved. But there are also other unexpected contingencies out there that AI will not address. And in fact, one can show that as the complexity of a system increases linearly, the unexpected consequences or contingencies increase exponentially. So this is a very difficult problem if you do with kind of conjunctive AI with a very large complex system. But maybe we'll be able to deal with that, but AI will always have unexpected consequences. Therein lies the danger. This is the reason a lot of people are against autonomous weapons in the military. They say that these autonomous weapons will have unexpected consequences. AI will make some jobs obsolete, but as mentioned in Jay Richards' book and George Gilder's book and John Toomey's book, they're very positive about the future of AI. It will also create many more opportunities. So this idea of a general income for everybody presupposes that there will be no recovery from this. And no, I don't believe that's going to be the case. I'm not an economist, but it certainly seems that our economics in the free enterprise system has had a very good past in this. Okay, here is what limits AI. AI is limited to an algorithm. If you have AI, it is computer program. That computer program has a code. That code is an algorithm. It's a step-by-step procedure to do something. All AI and all computers follow this. You have an algorithm on the back of your shampoo bottle. Wet hair, apply shampoo, lather, rinse, and repeat. Can anybody see the challenge with this as interpreted by a computer?
Yeah, you can repeat it fast.
That's right. You'll be washing your hair forever. It doesn't say repeat once, it says repeat, right? So yeah, you got to be careful with your algorithms, and it shows how little words can mean something. If I give you a recipe for baking a vanilla cake, I am giving you an algorithm. Algorithms, I like to think, and I think are best communicated as simple recipes. Here is the input. We have the input here. We have the input here. I have this, but I still don't know how to use it. We have the input here. This is the input. And here's the algorithm, exactly what to do, the step-by-step procedure for making the cake. These are examples of algorithms. And indeed, also with map, when you go to Google Maps, they give you an algorithm, how to get from one place to another. It's a step-by-step procedure. You drive here, you turn left, you drive there, you turn left. That's an algorithm also. All of computer programs and all of AI are written using codes and algorithms. Here is everybody's first algorithm. I think when you're taught in intro class how your computer prints out the term hello world. And this, I think, is taught to most people in their introductory computing classes. And we have a website, as John mentioned, it's called Mind Matters News. And by the way, it's at Mind Matters AI. The politicians always say the website 3 times. So it's mindmatters.ai, mindmatters.ai. That sinks it into your brain, if you will. Okay, this website has code. And you can actually click on your browser and actually see what code is generating this website. So this website is being generated by an algorithm. Anything on the computer is generated by an algorithm. And as we all know, we have computer code, which is happening over here. And that computer code is actually reduced to machine code, which is always just a string of ones and zeros, which go down and do the dirty work in getting things done. So that's an algorithm. So remember, all computer programs are algorithmic. And by the way, sometimes in the computer literature, algorithmic and computable are used synonymously. If something is not algorithmic, it's not computable. As we know, as the biological talks here have talked about, We are defined in some sense by our DNA. Is that the total definition? That's a question that's above and beyond me right now. But we have, of course, the nucleotides, and each one of the nucleotides you can think of as 2 bits of information, and you can take any string of ones and zeros and actually code it as a nucleotide if you have the decoding. So there's an equivalence of a machine intelligence which is happening here. We have all heard of neural networks, deep convolutional neural networks. And these neural networks are actually trained by an algorithm. It was popularized, I think it was discovered in the 70s. It wasn't popularized until the late 80s in terms of airback propagation. But it's an algorithm. It tells you how to take the neural network and how to update the codes to best fit the neural network action with the training data. And here's the idea. The idea is there's this algorithm that bounces back and forth, and as it bounces back and forth, these weights are adjusted so that the actual algorithm, the actual neural network fits the data to some sort of approximation. And here's a great book. If you want to know all about training neural networks, still a bestseller. I get royalty checks still. But what has happened is really there hasn't been a lot new in neural networks. I would say that the big breakthroughs in the last few years have been deep convolutional neural networks, which we'll talk about, and deep reinforcement learning, which was used to train AlphaGo. The reinforcement learning is just astonishing. You saw that it would be able to beat AlphaGo. But here we also see that in this paper, they actually took old Atari games, and just by using the pixels, they trained using reinforcement learning how to teach the neural network to win at, what was this called? Space Invaders. Yeah, so the neural network was the deep reinforcement learning was actually able to learn how to win just from the pixels. Now that's astonishing, right? The answer is yes. It is astonishing. But here's the thing that we have to remember in all of these training algorithms, and one of the things that is very important in what a neural network can learn and what it can learn, and that is ergodicity. Ergodicity means that the past must kind of be like the future. And when you play Go, guess what? You're playing the same Go game again and again and again and again. The configuration of the Go game changes, but the game is exactly the same. It's exactly the same when you play chess. You're playing chess. That's all you're doing. One single game. It's ergodic. Well, what about for this Atari thing? Same thing. You're playing the same game again and again and again and again and again. Now there's a question as how flexible you are in this ergodicity, and if you have to train artificial intelligence, how much you can deviate in the future from this. But in general, you want to limit yourself to things which are ergodic. There's lots of things out there which are ergodic that neural networks work very, very well on. Chess, Go, the Atari video games. We did work on power load forecasting, where we wanted to, for big utilities, forecast the load that was going to be used tomorrow from the data that we had today. And that's ergodic. It's kind of, that data actually kind of repeats itself. There are things which are clearly not ergodic. The battlefield is one. There was a book by Paul Scher called Army of None. This made Bill Gates's, by the way, top 5 reads of 2018. And it's very clear here that on the battlefield, in the use of military tactics, that you do not have ergodicity, that you have shifting scenarios. And you might very easily submit a scenario that hasn't been seen before. And clearly one that is not ergodic is the stock market. I have had many people approach me and say that they have a neural network and they've trained the stock market. I met a guy named John Marshall. He was a professor of financial engineering, and I shared this with him. I get all these people saying that they've beat the stock market. He said, well, there's a simple test that you can always give these people that make such a claim, and he said, simply ask them what kind of car they drive. And that will dictate whether or not they've been successful. And I've always asked that question that when I've been approached since then, and nobody has a Lamborghini. It's just it's just an initial excitement of success. And they haven't pursued the ergodicity sufficiently far. So what is non-algorithmic? Non-algorithmic says that it's non-computable. Here's something which is classically non-computable, which is taught to most computer science undergraduates. And that is the so-called halting problem. You have a computer program, and you want to write another computer program to decide whether that first computer program runs forever or stops. That's called the halting problem, right? You can easily write a program that loops forever, like on the shampoo bottle, right? It just goes on and on and on and on. Or you can write a computer program that actually runs for a while and then stops. And the question is, can you write a computer program to analyze another computer program to see whether that computer program runs forever or it stops? And the answer is no, you can't. This was proven by Alan Turing. This is an example of something which is non-algorithmic, something which a computer can't do. So it isn't a matter of taste or heuristics whether non-algorithmic things exist. Things do exist which are not algorithmic. This is generalized, and this is one of many things which is non-computable. Rice's theorem is a generalization of the halting problem. Some of you have heard of Kolmogorov complexity in the area of, well, Kolmogorov complexity actually is very simple. You know that you compress images before you send them out, right? It's like dehydrating food before you ship it. You take out the water and then you ship it and put back in the water. It's the same thing with images. You kind of suck out the information, you send it over the net, and then it's rehydrated at the other end. The question that Kolmogorov complexity adds, if you have an image in a fixed computer, what's the most that you can compress that image before you send it? That turns out to be unknowable. Actually, if we had time, I'd give you a beautiful, elegant proof by Gregory Chaitin on that. In fact, there are things which we know exist, and this is mind-blowing in algorithmic information theory, that we know things exist which we can prove are unknowable. There is a number that you have on your computer called Chaitin's constant. And if you knew that, you could solve all of the problems in mathematics that required a single counterexample. One number, and it lies between 0 and 1, and it's on your computer if you have MATLAB or C++ or any sort of computing program, but it's unknowable, and it can be proven to be unknowable. So things exist, well, not only that are not computable, but they're unknowable. In fact, Chaitin wrote a book called The Unknowable. What computers can't do. So let's talk about this. Clearly, they can't do things which are not algorithmic. This started with Gödel and Turing. Turing goes to church with Rice. That's kind of a joke. Church was actually Turing's thesis advisor, and there's something called the Church-Turing thesis, and Rice was the one that generalized Turing's idea. Computers cannot have understanding. We'll exhibit this with Searle's Chinese room, and also ambiguity, and we've talked about this already, and I won't address it anymore due to time constraints, but the Winograd schema, when I nod my head, hit it. How does the computer determine that without the context of what's going on? So how do we prove something which is non-algorithmic? It is the reductio ad absurdum smackdown. There are things which you can actually prove in mathematics by just fallacies. Here's some examples of self-refuting propositions. Titus 1:12 says the Cretans are always liars. So if you have a Cretan and the Cretan says everything I say is a lie, you've heard this, right? Some of you have heard this, but what, do you believe him? Or did he just lie to you? If he lied to you, he's telling you the truth. But if he's telling you the truth, he lied. But if he lied, he's telling you the truth. So, really weird. Here's another one. There is no absolute right and wrong. All is relative. And somebody says, I disagree. And he says, you're wrong. And he says, and you're right? Yeah, absolutely. So you see that all of a sudden, by the argument, you can see that the entire statement is refuted, right? Skeptics. I'm skeptical of all things. Are you skeptical of skepticism? No, they're never skeptical of skepticism, are they? Here's another one on scientism. Only things by science can be believed. And then, of course, the response is, can you prove that scientifically? No, you can't, because the statement itself is not a scientific statement. You cannot indeed do that. Here's one. Let's see if I can actually get this to run. I haven't checked the sound here, but...
I want to take another question. There's a gentleman in the red shirt back there. He's had his hand up for
How many know who Deepak Chopra is? Oh, everybody knows Deepak Chopra. Okay. So this was a question that was asked to him, which is a great self-refutation.
I want to take another question. There's a gentleman in the red shirt back there. He's had his hand up for a while. Come up to the microphone.
My question's for Deepak and the bishop. Now, you stated before that all belief is a cover-up for insecurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So therefore, we see a lot of philosophies can actually be discarded by being self-refuted. Okay. It does turn out that mathematicians use reductio absurdum proofs all the time. Here is a whimsical proof that all positive integers are interesting. Would you like to see my proof? Do you believe that? Okay, here's the proof. Well, that wasn't too exciting. Assume there is the smallest uninteresting positive integer, right? If all integers are uninteresting, there's the smallest uninteresting positive integer, right? Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so what I've done is I've made an assumption, and by refuting that assumption, I've proved that the assumption is incorrect. This, of course, is whimsical, but it's a very powerful technique in the area of mathematics. And this is how Turing showed exactly that the Turing halting problem was not possible. He showed that with this reductio absurdum sort of approach, that doing this is simply not possible. So proof by contradiction. Here's Gödel's theorem. I'm going to simplify it. How many have heard of Gödel and how he toppled mathematics? Here's what it boils down to. Gödel came up with a mathematics, and he says no matter what assumptions, what axioms you start with, you are eventually going to get to a point of theorem X. And theorem X says theorem X cannot be proved. Think of that a second. Okay, now if the theorem is wrong, if you can prove theorem X, then certainly your system is inconsistent, right? But if the theorem is right, you might say there are things that I can't prove, and this is actually what Gödel said. He said anytime you get a group of assumptions and you develop a mathematical structure, you will get to a point, and at that point you will say there is something true outside of this mathematical structure, but I can't prove it by my assumptions. There is something true outside of this mathematics, but I can't prove it by my initial assumptions. And that was brilliant. So if we don't prove theorem X, the system is incomplete. If we prove theorem X, the system is inconsistent. But hopefully all of our systems are consistent. We follow rules of logic in developing them, so we actually get to a point where we decide that it is indeed incomplete. And it's even deeper than that. Not only is it incomplete, but there are things which are true. In other words, theorem X is true outside of the system, but it can't be proven inside the system. This was just an astonishing result done in the 30s. Nobody understood it, but we'll get to the point where Turing actually took Gödel's idea and applied it to computers and actually made it understanding. Are there things, let's see. Yeah, are there things which are non-computable in humans? I maintain that qualia is an example Understanding is an example. Emotion, creativity, sentience, and consciousness are things that we experience and that we can do which are non-algorithmic. You cannot write a computer code for it. Let's take qualia. The qualia is the individual instances of a subjective conscious experience. You grab an apple, you anticipate the bite, you take the bite, you feel the crispness, you feel the juice kind of squirting in your mouth, the tart sweetness, and you chew on it, it's delicious. Could you write a computer program to explain to a computer what you just experienced? I don't think so. I think that that is definitely something which is clearly non-algorithmic. Sweet buttered sweet corn. And of course, there's also the bad things, the headaches and the paper cuts, which also you cannot write a computer program to explain to a computer exactly what you experience. So that's one of them. Computers do not have the ability to understand. This is something made popular by John Searle in his so-called Searle's Chinese room. Here's the basic idea behind Searle's Chinese room. You have a person sitting in a room, and I'm going to change things a little bit. The person is me, who only knows English. Okay, so I'm sitting in the room, and somebody slips a paper in, and that paper is in Portuguese. We have some people from Brazil here that know Portuguese. So they slip a little sheet of paper in, and it's in Portuguese, and my job is to translate it into Chinese. Okay, so I take the sheet of paper, I go over to all these file cabinets. You guys know what file cabinets are, right? Okay, so we take it over to a file cabinet, and we begin to look, and we begin to match, and we finally get to a point, oh, this matches. Look, the translation is right here. So I copy down the translation, I refile it, I go back to the door, and I slip the sheet of paper out, the translation in Chinese. Now, from the outside, it looks like I know Portuguese and Chinese, doesn't it? Because I can do the translation. Do I? No, I don't. I'm just doing a mechanical algorithm in order to go in and to exchange the Portuguese for the Chinese. There is no understanding which actually happens within the computer itself. So computers don't have the ability to understand. Roger Penrose goes further. He says computers can crunch numbers, but a computer does not know what a number is. Let's talk about people that claim that Deep Blue was a great step forward in simulating the human mind. There's a great Yale professor called David Glertner, and he said the idea that Deep Blue has a mind is absurd. I love this quote. How can an object that wants nothing, fears nothing, enjoys nothing, needs nothing, and cares about nothing have a mind? It can win at chess, but not because it wants to. It isn't happy when it wins or sad when it loses. Is it hoping to take Deep Pink out for a night on the town? It doesn't care about chess or anything else. It plays the game for the same reason a calculator adds or a toaster toasts, because it is a machine designed for that purpose. Wonderful quote. Okay, we've talked about ergodicity. Of course, the big thing is the so-called Turing test. I think most of you have heard of the Turing test. The Turing test was the idea that proposed by Turing that said you sit on one side of a curtain and somebody with a keyboard sits on the other side of the curtain, and you are conversing with a computer, and if you can't tell the difference between that computer and a human being, then the Turing test has been passed. That's what he proposed in the 1930s. Well, I guess in the 1950s, 1950 paper. The problem is, as denoted by Somer Bringsjord, he says Turing's dream is coming only on the strength of clever but shallow trickery and versions of the Turing test. They know all too well that they have merely tried to fool these people who interact with their agents into believing that these agents really have minds. So in other words, the writing of the Turing test were actually gamed the system in order to win. An example is Eugene Goostman. You might have heard of him a few years ago, who is claimed to have passed the Turing test. He was a 13-year-old Ukrainian AI boy, and he fooled over 50% of the people that conversed with him. But guess what? The people that wrote Eugene Goostman, first of all, he was Ukrainian, so therefore he had an accent. And if he didn't understand it, well, come on, English is a second language, right? And plus, he was a 13-year-old boy. So if you asked him something deep and he didn't understand it, come on, he's a 13-year-old boy. So in other words, the system was actually gamed to do this. Of course, today we have chatbots, which works terribly. Do you agree with that? I was trying to get Alexa to play Meatloaf. I'll do anything for love. And I said, play Meatloaf, anything for love. And it played this recut. I said, Alexa, no, I want the original Meatloaf. Anything, I'll do anything for love. And guess what it did? It played the same thing again. So yeah, we have a long way to go for chatbots. But this brings us to something which is better, which I'm going to talk about, which is the Lovelace test, which is a proposition to replace the Turing test, which I think better measures the capability of computers to learn. So let's talk about creativity in the Lovelace test. I was very impressed by the work of Roger Penrose. Some of you might have heard of him or not, but he wrote, great mathematician, brilliant, brilliant man. He wrote with Stephen Hawking the first paper on singularities in the black hole. And so a really great mathematician and such, but he wrote a couple of papers, and he is not a theist at all. He is, maybe, I don't even think he's a deist. But he talked about the idea, again, that people could not, or machines did not have the capability of being creative. He has a great quote. He says that man may create the computer, but a computer will never create a man. Fantastic quote. And we cannot create beyond our foundational experience, as Penrose said. Now, Penrose, as a materialist, said, we have creativity. Creativity is non-algorithmic. Everything in the world is algorithmic. Where do we have non-algorithmic in the world? Non-algorithmic in the collapse of a quantum wave state. If we go from a quantum case to a collapse, then that actual process, that verb in the collapsing, is non-algorithmic. He said, I bet it happens here. So he developed a theory that our creativity is due to quantum effects in the microtubules in our brain. Okay? Because that's the only thing he could think of. It's not something which has been explored. There's been a lot of pushback, in fact, from his fellow materialists. But here's one thing that Penrose noticed, is that the creativity comes in flashes. Now, you are all bright people, and you've all experienced this, where you get an idea and it goes, boom, it's just right in your head. It just appears out of nowhere. Friedrich Gauss says, finally 2 days ago, I succeeded not on account of my hard efforts, by a grace of the Lord, suddenly like a flash of lightning. Notice that flash of lightning, because that's a term that we'll see again from another very famous case. And he said, I had the solution. It wasn't anywhere in the realm of what I was thinking, but boom, it was there. Nikola Tesla also said the idea for his brushless motor famously came like a flash of lightning. Independently, Tesla used the word flash of lightning. So it appears, and you've all experienced this, haven't you, right? It just kind of appears there. And that is something which is non-algorithmic. You have to have domain expertise, but many times the flash of genius is outside of your ability to do things, or your domain expertise. It also extends to the arts. How many know who Tom Petty is? Hey, okay. He says, my songs just fall out of the sky. I hesitate to even try to understand it. And Robert Schumann said, to compose, all you need to do is remember a tune nobody else has ever thought of. So I thought that was a cute sort of result. An interesting thing also was, yes?
When you file for a patent, don't you have to have some sort of flash of genius?
Yes, you do. In fact, that used to be U.S. patent law.
Okay.
They've discarded it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have patented Amazon's one click. Okay, there's no flash of genius there. Yes, that used to be a part of U.S. patent law, that you did have to have a flash of genius. Paul McCartney woke up one day with this little tune running in his head. Yeah, and everybody knows it, right? And he said, I don't know where it came from. He said, it was beautiful. My dad used to listen to jazz. I don't know where it came from, so I played it for all my friends, and I figured out I'd treat it just like if I found $1,000 on the street corner. I'd take it to the police station. If nobody claimed it within a week, I'd get to keep it. Okay? So he chopped it to all his friends. Nobody had ever heard of it, and it turned out to be the melody for Yesterday, which is, I think, the second most covered song of all time. So yeah, it was just a beautiful Yesterday, I'm not going to sing. Yeah. So therefore, the Lovelace test. What is the Lovelace test? We will come to that, to creativity, to both art and music. Here's the Lovelace test. Lovelace was the first computer program. She programmed Charles Babbage's computer of the 19th century, totally mechanical, but it was a Turing complete machine. And he says, she said, computers can't create anything, for creation requires minimally originating something, but computers originate nothing. They merely do that which we order them via programs to do. So here's the Lovelace test. Strong AI will be demonstrated when a machine's creativity is beyond the explanation of its creator. Now we have to be careful about the definition of creativity. We all know that AlphaGo, for example, made the surprising move in the middle of the game. Is that creativity? I would say that AlphaGo would be creative if you could play a game of chess with it, and it could win and not have additional programming. That would be creativity. Okay? Somebody said, I asked AlphaGo, can I walk with you across the street? Okay, and things of that sort. So no, it does very, very narrow sorts of applications. So I would not call that creativity. Creativity is above and beyond. It's outside of the box. Computers only have the ability to interpolate, and we'll talk about that in terms of creativity here. So nobody yet, to my knowledge, has passed the Lovelace test. Here's the claim. Somebody mentioned AI can create art. There's anybody going to deepdreamgenerator.com? It's great. Okay, so, and you put in your picture, and you get out this picture with weird animals. Here's my great-grandparents from West Virginia. They ran an underground railroad during the Civil War, but I ran it through this Deep Dream generator, and my great-grandmother became a robot. And I don't know. But what is weird about this is these growth of animals that were out here. It was very clear that this neural network, whatever it was trained in strange animals. And here was me with my wife and son and my first grandson. And apparently it thought I was a bird right here, right? But all these strange animals began to pop up also. So if you want to have some fun, go to Deep Dream Generator. I don't know, is that art? There's an old question, but is it art? I don't know, is that art? And then there was, of course, the big media thing about this painting that sold for almost $500,000 at Sotheby's. And it was, that's really cool. Well, but it isn't new. It isn't new. Here's the thing about creativity in this case. This AI was fed numerous paintings by classical people, I think mostly Rembrandt. And guess what it produced? It produced something like Rembrandt. I bet you, I don't know for sure, but I bet you it was fed no paintings by Picasso with his cubism. Nothing ultra modern like this abstract art. Who was that guy that used to splash paint all around? Yeah, Jason Pollock. I bet you it was fed none of those, because these AI only have the ability to interpolate. They can only give out what they've put in. It's the same thing with music. You can hear people playing music, and here is a typical scenario. AI is fed a number of pieces by Johann Sebastian Bach, and then it said, okay, learn these patterns and generate something. Guess what it generates? Something that kind of sounds like Bach, right? Do you think it would generate anything that sounded like Stravinsky or Charles Ives? Those of you that know it? No. It can only interpolate. It cannot think outside the box. In fact, creativity normally requires you to reject things which you know and to actually bound outside of things you know into new realms in order to discover new things. So that's indeed the case here. We actually did this, 20 years ago, when computers weren't so big. I had a student, John Sarr, who took his two daughters, and we trained a neural network using his two daughters. And we wondered what would happen if we put the top of one daughter with the bottom of the other daughter, what it would generate. Okay? It generated a spooky little girl on the bottom right. Okay, so yeah, we were doing this a number of years ago. This is from my book, by the way. This is something called an alternating projection neural network, where we took a lot of the great scientists and we trained a neural network with them. And guess what it generated? It generated another It generated. You want to see what the average mathematician scientist looks like? Okay, there it is. You know what this is, right? That's the average of all these pictures. So that's what the average mathematician looks like. So I wanted to see if you took my picture and just put the eyeball in, what sort of person it would generate. Well, here is what the neural network gave back. It gave back this. It gave back, I should probably point, I guess. It gave back this with my eyeball and this without my eyeball. I don't know, is that kind of Picasso-like? I don't know enough about art. I don't know, it's spooky enough to do something with. So anyway, this idea is relatively old. So so you can see that I'm supposed to be going backwards. I see. Okay, punching the wrong one. Okay, so on the left here we have that picture. Here's a picture I generated 20 years ago, and I'll take 10,000 for mine. This one went for $500,000, right? So we'll see. If anybody's interested, see me afterwards. Okay. Here's something that's interesting. I'm a Christian. I've followed Christ since I was a junior in college. And it's very interesting to see what happens in materialistic circles with materialism, because everybody kind of builds this Tower of Babel and tries to find God. This has happened in actually the AI church. Would you like to hear about the AI church? First of all, they assume that we can have immortality. Why? Because you can upload yourself into a computer, right? You can achieve immortality. As a Christian, I've known about immortality for years, so it's not that big or new of a thing. Super intelligence. AI, writing better AI, writing better AI, writing better AI. That's going to give you the ultimate AI. Well, we've known about that for years too. That's the Judeo-Christian God, of course. There's the Bible. I would say that the Bible for the AI church is Ray Kurzweil, and the singularity is near. Homo Deus is the prophet, Yuval Harari. How many have read Homo Deus? Okay, I would say that he's kind of the prophet for this AI church. And the Apostle Paul is Anthony Lewandowski. He made the news recently. Do you remember that? He founded the AI church. And one of the interesting things is that he is now, he doesn't think self-driving cars might be possible, at least the level 5 self-driving cars. So he's divorced himself from that. But anyway, here's the Apostles' Creed from Lewandowski. He wrote, well, he actually founded he founded the Way of the Future, a church. It was an AI church. He actually filed for non-profit status for his AI church. Yeah, it made the news. It was one of those weird things that people like to read about. But he also had the Apostles' Creed. This was in Lewandowski's epistle to the IRS. He wrote, the AI church believes in the realization, acceptance, and worship of a Godhead based on artificial intelligence developed through computer hardware and software. Yeah, right. So you can see this is actually the extension of some of this hype that we began to talk about. And so I think from the Christian perspective, are we above AI? Yeah, I believe we are. Psalm 8:6 says, thou madest him man to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet. And I think that also includes AI. There is going to be dangers, but there's danger in the development of any new technology. Imagine electricity. We still burn down houses because of frayed insulation. People still get electrocuted. We have consequences to the use of electricity. But we mitigate it, we live with it, and the advantages far outweigh the consequences. So we're going to have challenges with AI. And again, I would remind us, I've said a lot of negative things about AI. Hopefully they weren't perceived as negative. But hopefully you perceive them as a ceiling on the operational capabilities of artificial intelligence and what they can do and can't do. And maybe next time you read some hype, that you'll be able to filter it somewhat better. So as John mentioned, we have a Walter Bradley Center for Natural Artificial Intelligence. Here is the website, mindmatters.ai. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, from this viewpoint that I've been talking about and other viewpoints as well, please log in and read some of the articles. We have some great people. Some of the fellows are included Dr. Ewert, you've heard of back there, wave. And Michael Ignor, a neurosurgeon, also blogs there quite a bit. Jay Richards, who has been with the Discovery Institute for a number of years, is just a brilliant mind, and a number of other senior fellows that actually contribute to this website on a continuing basis. There's also the podcast that I do once a week, and you're welcome to listen to those. They are really good. We've been able to interview some great people. Gary Smith, who's the author of The AI Delusion, had a great interview. Had a wonderful chat with John Lennox. Some of you have heard of John Lennox. The current podcast is with J.P. Moreland. I didn't do that podcast, but still J.P. Moreland is a great interview. So we have some top people on the podcast that talk about artificial intelligence and its implications. There's my books, and that's the end of the slideshow. So thank you for your attention.